Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking something that honestly causes so many of us a deep, quiet sense of shame, procrastination, and we're going to transform it into a totally actionable, completely scientific roadmap. We are stepping away from the guilt trips today, and we're moving straight into how your brain and behavioral physics actually operate.
Look, if you keep getting stuck on tasks you genuinely care about, I really want you to know upfront, you are not alone. So many of us live with this internal monologue where we feel like we're just living the exact same day over and over again. You know the feeling, right? You sit down at your desk, you've got genuinely good intentions. You're going to pay 2 bills, answer just 1 email, and fill out a totally simple form. But then an hour goes by and you're still doom scrolling on your phone. Your chest feels tight, the bills are still sitting there unpaid, and you just feel entirely frozen. On paper, you know you're capable, but inside, it feels like your brain just keeps slamming into this invisible wall. So let's get into section 1, the myth of laziness. We literally have to debunk this right out of the gate.
Being stuck is not a character flaw. It absolutely does not mean you have a lack of willpower. What you're probably experiencing is what clinicians call executive dysfunction. Think of your executive functions like your brain's internal management system. It's this complex network that helps you plan things out, shift your attention, and regulate your emotions. Well, executive dysfunction is basically a breakdown in that management system. It explains exactly why your brain hits that invisible wall, turning all your good intentions into unfinished projects and late fees. And this is especially true when your brain is already overloaded by stress, burnout, anxiety, or neurodivergence like ADHD or autism.
When you really break it down, our secret, everyday struggles actually map to very specific cognitive failures, like paying a bill late. That isn't about you being an irresponsible person. It's secretly overloading your working memory and your time management skills. A room that constantly stays cluttered isn't just you being messy, it's an actual breakdown in your brain's organization and self-monitoring. You know when you roughly know where things go, but the act of actually putting them away feels literally impossible? Yeah, that's because multi-step tasks are completely maxing out your brain's bandwidth.
I really want you to internalize this profound truth. You are not broken. You are just in a pattern. Our brains are fundamentally wired to be efficient, so they default to familiar routines, carving these deep neural pathways. The more you repeat a pattern, even a terribly paralyzing one like pulling out your phone when you feel overwhelmed, the deeper that loop gets. But here's the good news. Simply being aware of this loop is the very first step to stepping out of it.
Which brings us to section 2, the physics of productivity. To break these loops, we're going to gamify this struggle using classical mechanics.
Believe it or not, productivity is surprisingly mechanical. I mean, even Sir Isaac Newton probably procrastinated on his chores, right? But think about his laws of motion applied to your to-do list. First, objects at rest tend to stay at rest, meaning mathematically, getting started is the absolute hardest part of any task. Second, force equals mass times acceleration. It isn't just about how hard you work, it's about the direction you apply that energy. And third, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Your productivity is essentially a tug of war. You've got productive forces like motivation battling unproductive forces like stress or lack of sleep. And honestly, eliminating the opposing friction is almost always way more effective than just trying to summon pure willpower to push through it.
So here is the ultimate hack for Newton's first law, the 2-minute rule. To overcome the friction of being at rest, you have to shrink the activation energy required to move. Don't tell yourself you have to go for a 5-mile run. That's too huge. Just tell yourself to put on your running shoes and fill up your water bottle. Don't sit down or write a massive 10-page report. Just open the blank document and type out the title. If you find a way to start your task in less than 2 minutes, you're going to find that an object in motion really does tend to stay in motion.
And that leads us right into section 3, the power of starting tiny. We're going to bring together 2 massive behavioral frameworks to solve this.
But before we do, chew on this number for a second. 40. Researchers have found that 40% of our daily behaviors are just automatic habits. Nearly half of what you do today isn't even a conscious choice. This perfectly proves why we have to redesign our routines instead of constantly trying to drain our extremely limited daily supply of willpower. The difference between the two frameworks we're looking at basically comes down to starting versus sustaining. On one hand, we've got James Clear's Atomic Habits, which is a systems and identity-first approach. It is phenomenal for sustaining long-term progress. On the other hand, we have BJ Fogg's Tiny Habits, which is entirely emotion-first. Tiny Habits is hands down the best method for bypassing that initial awful friction of getting off the couch when you feel totally paralyzed. Basically, if you can't even get a behavior off the ground, you need Fogg. But if your habits always seem to fade out after 3 weeks, you need Clear.
Let's look at Fogg's foolproof sequence for getting started. He calls it the ABC method. First, you need an anchor. This is an existing routine you already do without thinking, like pouring your morning coffee. Second, the behavior. Now this must take under 30 seconds. I'm talking 2 push-ups or putting exactly 1 plate into the dishwasher. And finally, celebration. Immediately after you do the behavior, you have to generate a positive emotion. Give a quiet little yes or a quick fist pump. I know it sounds a little silly, but it's neuroscience. That immediate hit of positive emotion wires your brain with a dopamine reward loop. It literally codes the new behavior as something your brain wants to repeat.
Okay, moving to section 4, building systems that last. Once you've used those tiny 30-second habits to actually get off the starting line, we have to build the architecture to keep you going.
This is exactly where James Clear's 4 laws of behavior change step in. To scale up your tiny habits into permanent identity shifts, you systematically redesign your environment. Make the cue obvious. Leave your gym shoes right by the front door. Make the craving attractive. Make the response easy by removing as much friction as humanly possible. And make the reward satisfying. You're shifting your mindset from saying, well, I'm trying to read more, to simply declaring, I am a reader. You are designing a system where doing the right thing literally becomes the path of least resistance.
And we ground this whole system in science with the number 66. Research shows it takes a median of 66 days to form a true automatic habit. Sure, sometimes it clicks in 18 days, sometimes it takes 200, but 66 is the median. The huge takeaway here is that consistency matters so much more than intensity. Doing a tiny 2-minute version of your habit for 66 days straight is going to change your brain's wiring far more effectively than doing some massive, exhausting 3-hour bursts just once a week.
Finally, we reach section 5, progress through self-compassion. We have to talk about the psychological safety net that keeps all of this together.
How do you actually keep your momentum up for 66 days without burning out or slipping right back into executive dysfunction? You use the self-compassion reset. First, test your inner voice. When you inevitably slip up, are you calling yourself lazy? Stop and ask yourself, would I say this to my best friend? If the answer is no, you have to cut that negative self-talk out, because harsh self-criticism actively spikes your stress and just fuels more executive dysfunction. Second, take a genuinely guilt-free micro break. Step away. And third, reconnect with your why. What exactly would your future self thank you for doing today?
There's amazing research from the Harvard Business Review that captures what they call the progress principle. They found that of all the things that can boost our inner work life, our motivation, and our engagement, the single most important factor is just making progress in meaningful work. Tracking small, meaningful wins is the ultimate catalyst. You do not need a massive victory to feel motivated. A tiny, 30-second win literally changes the chemistry of your brain and sets you up to succeed tomorrow.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a real challenge. Think about the tasks that have been paralyzing you lately. I want you to apply the physics of productivity right this second. What is one tiny 30-second action? An action so ridiculously small you literally cannot fail at it that your future self will thank you for. Find it, do it, and celebrate it. Because at the end of the day, the trajectory of your life isn't defined by massive, exhausting leaps. It's defined by the physics of simply choosing to start. Go find your 30 seconds.